Good evening, everybody. This is Robin with another edition of Horror Pop After Midnight. And my guest tonight is screenwriter Tom Jolliffe. How's it going, Tom?
Yeah, very good, Robin. Thank you.
All right.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for coming out of your busy time across the pond. I know it's like later in the night over there compared to here in the States.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I'm a night owl, so like most horror screenwriters probably are.
Oh, that's good. Before we get into business, let's talk about you turned down the writing role for the first Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. How come you turned that down to write that film?
It was at the time, so I've worked with the producers quite a few times. So Scott Jeffrey in particular, he's done loads of films, and must have worked with him 10, 12 times already. So yeah, they came to me asking me if I wanted to write it. I was quite keen initially, but I was also juggling a couple of things at the same time. And so I thought, look, if I can get it kind of done and dusted in a couple of weeks, because they wanted it within the space of a month so they can go off and shoot it. So I had to have quite a fast turnaround. So we worked a little bit on a treatment, submitted it to the distributors, and they said, well, that's a little bit too extreme. So if people thought the first one was a little bit violent, it could have been a bit worse. But yeah, so because we'd wasted a little bit of time submitting that and having to wait for an answer, I kind of had to I just didn't have time to carry it on, because I then got offered Cinderella's Revenge. And because it had Mark L. Lester attached to it, I just couldn't turn it down.
That's pretty good. So how's that feel to be working with him?
It was amazing because obviously, like a lot of people, I've grown up watching his films. Commando in particular is a big personal favourite of mine. So yeah, as soon as I knew he would, because Scott had actually worked with him before on a home invasion kind of film. And I was quite keen to do that. So I'd almost half mentioned to him, if something comes up again, like another action film with Mark Lester, I wouldn't mind doing that. So yeah, he came back with me on that. I was still juggling a couple of other things, so I had to kind of drop Winnie the Pooh, unfortunately. Although I say that, if I had kept it on, I would have been a Razzie Award winner by now. So I might have come out well out of that.
All right, now let's talk about Cinderella's Revenge. I haven't seen the film, but I checked out the trailer, and I love the practical bloody and gore effects in the film. And it seems like there's also a lot of beautiful cinematography shots in the film, since it's kind of like a period piece a little bit. Tell me a little bit about that, and also tell me who created that cool mask in the trailer, which you see Cinderella wearing.
Yeah, so that was an interesting concept. So we had this idea of Cinderella kind of going really dark with it. I suppose going back to its roots, because the original stories were quite dark as well. That's where all the stuff with the sort of cutting off toes to fit into the shoe came up. That came right back from Grimm's fairy tales and things like that. So we went right back to that, and we decided to do something kind of horror with a little bit of comedy as well. I'm not too sure who designed the mask, but the idea of the mask came maybe halfway through development. There was original ideas to make maybe something a bit more elaborate, like a pumpkin-headed creature, but just the budget wouldn't allow for that. Then we had the idea of the mask as a kind of, it's almost like this thing where she disguises herself, almost from herself. So she puts on the mask and she can kind of do all those dark things and all those dark thoughts she has within her. So it's quite symbolic. I think that works quite well. And we'd always written with someone kind of famous in mind for the fairy godmother. And I didn't really know until probably well after halfway through writing and through the development that it was going to be Natasha Henstridge. But I was really pleased with that.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan.
Oh, I love Natasha Henstridge too. I met her at Horror Hound. She's been doing a lot of indie horror films. Whatever she does is golden. I don't care what anybody says. I think she's a great actress, and in the trailer of Cinderella's Revenge, she looks like a kick-ass fairy godmother, which helps Cinderella, take care of business and do some bloody killing and some bloody revenge. I mean, she was perfect for that role. So, what was it like to work with Natasha Henstridge on there, and also the main actress who plays Cinderella, Lauren Sterrick? Was she your idea for Cinderella, or did you interview other actresses for that role?
I didn't really have a say in casting, unfortunately. But I say that, but every choice they made in the result, I'm really happy with. I think Lauren does a really good job as Cinderella. Natasha is amazing as the fairy godmother. She's kind of like, because she's been there and done it for so many years. She's kind of like, she was just the sort of the senior pro on set. Don't want to make her sound old because she's still quite young, but she's done it for sort of 30 years now. But she really had fun with the role as well. I think that's part of what really kind of resonated with her when she was reading the script, is how much fun she could have with it. We'd written it that way anyway, but I think what she did was take it off the page and do something really kind of really fun with it. But there's a bit of a sense of wicked fun throughout the whole film, I think, particularly with the fairy godmother and the wicked stepsisters and the evil stepmother.
So how much blood's going to be in this film?
I don't want to spoil too much, but there's plenty of blood, plenty of revenge, and there's some nice memorable moments, I think.
Okay.
I think the fans seem to have responded to it quite well when it was in the cinemas last month. So I think it's looking good. So hopefully it will come out streaming soon and everyone else can kind of catch up and see it.
I'm excited for it because when I saw the trailer with Natasha Henstridge in it and then Lauren, I'm not familiar with her work. She just looks like the perfect Cinderella. She kind of reminded me of the Cinderella that popped out of the Grimm fairy tales book. Like she really invented herself. Like she really came out of that book with the fairy godmother. I don't know what it is. It just seems like she fit that role pretty cool. Because when I was watching that trailer, I go, I have a feeling Lauren is going to do one hell of a job once I see it. Because I can't wait for it to see it on streaming too. So in the film, is it mostly a lot of practical effects, or do you have a little special effects with the makeup and blood or anything like that?
So most of the sort of the blood and everything is practical. There's a little bit of sort of I guess CGI effects in terms of like the fairy godmother waving her wand and things. So there's a few effects shots with that. But for the most part, they've tried to stay quite practical and old school. Which again, that's something that I really like and really respond to. That's always my preference, is if you can do it practically and in camera, that's the best way.
Yeah, who's doing the score for the film too? A lot of good, horror films have great scores. Who's doing the score on that?
Yeah, I'm not too sure on that. There's so many composers in all my films, and I've always got so many composers. But I can say the score is really good. So whoever did it did a really good job.
You also play a little bit of guitar too. So do you do a little composing in some of the films you write as well?
Yeah, I've done it in a couple of my short films that I've done. So usually it's something where I'd like to do it a bit more, but I don't have enough equipment or time usually. I'm doing a self-produced feature film at the moment, which I'm shooting at the weekend actually. I'm half considering whether I might compose that one myself, partly to save money, but also I'd quite enjoy doing it. It just depends on time, really. But I know quite a few good composers, and so we'll see. I think I'll probably end up outsourcing it to someone, but I think there might come a time where I might think, I might like to spend a year or two doing composing if I take a little break from writing.
That's pretty cool. Now let's talk about, a little bit about Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Now they're doing a Pooh verse. You know, they're gonna have Pinocchio,
Yeah.
Sleeping Beauty, Peter Pan, and the trailer for the Bambi movie looked wild, man. But do you ever think Cinderella from Cinderella's Revenge? Do you think that will ever cross over into the Pooh verse if they keep going with that?
Um, I mean, the thing with a lot of so with Cinderella's Revenge, we had two American companies. So we had Mark Lester's company and another one, and then it was a British company that kind of did the actual production itself over here. And they all know Scott. They've all worked with Scott. Everyone's kind of like in the British industry, quite interconnected. So it wouldn't be without, out of the realms of possibility. But also, there's another Cinderella film coming out called Cinderella's Curse by Louisa Warren. I've worked with her loads of times as well. So yeah, it might be a battle of which Cinderella ends up with in the Pooh universe. So we'll see.
I'm so stoked for that. I'm just excited. But now you have a gothic horror that's being sold to the Cannes Festival. Tell me a little bit about it. Baby in the Basket. What's this gothic horror film about? Is it going to be like? Is it going to be like real scary? Is it going to be one of those type of practical films that messes with your mind while you're watching the film, where it gets you thinking and guessing and stuff like that, or keep you on the edge of your seat?
Yeah, we're hoping it's something like that. We were really inspired by films sort of like Rosemary's Baby, The Omen. It's a little bit slow burning and it's more built on atmosphere rather than a lot of jump scares. So we're kind of going old school with it. It was this kind of passion project that came up with a friend of mine, Nathan Shepka. So he's one of the co-producers. Gary Collinson, who was kind of like my boss at Flickering Myth, he's co-producing as well. So we've kind of dragged him out from, writing about films into film production. He probably regrets it now, but so we've spent sort of 2 years on it already from development up to this point. It's just about finished right as we speak. It's kind of I think it's being rendered right now, actually, the final touch with the final version. Cannes was quite productive, but it's just this old school gothic horror film that we wanted to do. We kind of wanted to do it our way rather than, if I would have gone to some of the producers I've kind of written for, they might have wanted something a bit more kind of like The Conjuring or, very jump scary, but we wanted to do something a little bit different. But, if you want to do the things the way you want to, you have to produce yourself. But that's something I'm moving into a little bit more now anyway, is producing my own films. So we're hoping this one kind of captures a good audience. I think we've seen that there's quite a lot of interest in it. There's been a lot of kind of spiritual horrors and kind of religious horrors kind of recently with Immaculate and things like that. So there's definitely a kind of audience there at the moment. It's definitely kind of in vogue. And obviously there's been like Omen remakes and Exorcist reboots. So yeah, it kind of fits in with all that.
So how'd you come up with that? How'd you come up with that story for you to decide to have your turn on that type of, noir film? What really led you into to write something like that?
Yeah, I mean, what normally happens, so Nathan and myself kind of toss ideas back and forth to each other a lot of time. We'll say, oh, what do you think of this? Even if we're talking about something we're planning to do ourselves. Nathan had just had this idea of a baby being left on the doorstep of like a nun's convent on a remote island somewhere. So it kind of snowballed from there, and we kind of started developing it. I was quite interested and keen to kind of write it because he kind of asked me if I'd be interested. And yeah, it kind of snowballed from there. We did a crowdfunder. We sourced some financing for it, and we shot it almost a year ago now. So yeah, we're looking forward to it being released, hopefully end of this year or early next year.
I can't wait. And also, you got that actress Lisa Reisner as a supporting role in there. How'd you get her to be part of this film?
What happened was we'd had this role and we'd cast someone in it, and then because of the strikes out in America, the actress had to drop out. I mean, she wasn't actually a SAG member, but she was on a production that was affected by SAG, and they had to shut down. So it kind of pushed her shoot back, and then she was sort of unable to sort of commit to our one, unfortunately, because she'd already signed for the other one. And yeah, it got a bit complicated. So we then recast, and then Lisa was one of probably 500 or 600 people that applied for the role. And she really did stand out, and she's got really great screen presence. Really memorable role in this as well. It's kind of like short but memorable.
Those are the best type of films, especially when you get like a certain actor or actress that really, gets your attention and keeps you on the edge of the seat. And you look at that and they're like doing their job because they're really getting you into the film going, man, I can see why they're focusing more on her as a supporting role. Because sometimes actresses in supporting roles can usually, steal the whole movie from the main actor. And you're like, okay, how come the supporting actress wasn't the main actress and then the main actor or actress was the supporting role? And I love how that always happens in films like that. Like I said, I enjoyed Immaculate. I thought it was better than the Omen reboot. I just thought it blew it away, and the ending of the Immaculate, that really fucks you up, man.
Yeah. Well, we're hoping we'll have a few similar moments. Yeah, I like that film as well. I like that a lot. I thought that was a really good display for Sydney Sweeney to really show off her range. But I think, yeah, we're really hoping that people respond well to our film. I think the cast is just really amazing in it. They've done a really good job. We'd worked with a couple of them, the actresses, before, so we kind of knew what we were going to get. And then we cast a few other roles. And again, all the kind of people based in the UK, we kind of, everyone kind of knows each other. And then we had a few more established actresses in there, like Marianne Diabo from The Living Daylights.
Nice.
So, yeah. And she plays Mother Superior in it. That's going to be a really good role for her, I think, as well.
I can picture that. It's going to be kind of freaky seeing her playing that role. I mean, she's done all kinds of different roles, but her playing Mother Superior, I think she's going to scare me playing her playing Mother Superior. So, where did you shoot the film at?
We shot up in Scotland. So Nathan is based in Scotland. We've shot one film there already before, which we kind of shot in between lockdowns during COVID. We managed to find a space to shoot this kind of mystery thriller called When Darkness Falls. So there's so many like really amazing locations out there. You almost can't go wrong, and they're comparatively cheaper than down south in the UK in sort of the London area, which tend to be very expensive. So yeah, it kind of makes sense sometimes to set up base in Scotland. We shot at this really amazing place called St Conan's Kirk, so big sort of church. That makes up the bulk of the convent location in the script, and it looks amazing on film. Very gothic, perfect really for the film.
So when you wrote the film, did you do a lot of studying, reading up like on demonology, demons, like Catholic horrors of demonology? Did you do a lot of research and read some of those books on there to make that script so authentic like?
Yeah, I mean, I read up a little bit. I think I've done quite a lot of films which have sort of demonic undertones, and I've used quite a few demons in different films over the years, a few different mythologies. But I think what we did with this one is we kept it quite ambiguous. We wanted to have a bit of ambiguity to it, but we wanted to have a little bit of depth to the film, make it quite character focused. So, I mean, there's a little thing in the film which hopefully some people will pick up on. It's that most of the characters have some kind of connection to a respective deadly sin that they're all kind of guilty of. Some one or two, and it's everyone's kind of got a different thing. Um, so yeah, we try to lace a little nuggets in the script and have a little bit of a sort of, I guess, an undertone underneath that people kind of look back on if they watch it again and they start picking things up.
That's gonna be cool. I like stuff like that when you plant like Easter eggs in there, and then you figure out.
Yeah.
That was the same thing. Of course, you've seen Immaculate. We just talked about that. But if you watch Immaculate a little bit, you can see a few Easter eggs in there a little bit if you look hard enough, and you're like, oh, I can see why they did that in that certain scene and how it all plays out. And I kind of like how you're doing it with your film, too. See, I like films like that. It just makes it so good, and like Gothic. I love Gothic horror besides paranormal. I also love paranormal horror films too. Gothic and paranormal are my two favorites of the horror genre, and I just love it. And I love these type of films like what you're doing now. I still can't wait to see it. I'll probably here in the States. It'll probably be here like on streaming. I don't think it'll be at the theater, like Cinderella's Revenge, which was not the theater, so I'm waiting for it to come on streaming so I can see that as well. So, since everybody knows everybody in the UK, like in filmmaking, actors and actresses, so how popular is horror and indie horror in the UK? Is it like really big? Compare how popular it is in the States.
It's difficult. I think at the moment the UK film industry is not in really good shape. So for the most part, most of us are making films, and the main audience is the US audience. We tend to get, in terms of like the UK, we still get released and things on streaming, but they're not nearly as popular as they are on things like Tubi in the US. So yeah, they tend to be quite popular on Tubi. Like my first few films, they used to get kind of DVD releases over here in the UK, but that's a rarity now because DVD's kind of like, it's in bad shape at the moment. It's not great in the US, but I mean, in the UK, it's almost kind of dead, unfortunately, for this level of film anyway. So, yeah, I think we really kind of wanted to... We'd like to get a bigger UK audience, but I think it's quite difficult. It's often the most difficult territory to sell. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I think, I'm almost always writing for the US audience first and foremost.
That's a good way of thinking. So what do you think of your thoughts now? You're seeing more like indie horror films coming to the big screen, like Terrifier, Pooh and Honey, and a bunch of films by Shudder. So what's your thoughts about how indie horror is starting to get popular with the horror community now? It seems like there's more and more horror fans going to indie horror towards mainstream horror. Do you think that's on fire right now? Do you think it's going to get even more popular?
I hope so. I think it's one of those things, because these films can be made on like comparatively lower budgets than kind of action films and things like that. It makes sense to kind of do these. They're kind of lower risk, I guess. Streaming's opened up so many kind of possibilities for filmmakers and so many places to put your film. But at the same time, it's difficult to quantify how successful a film is by streaming numbers. Because if your film's like included as part of a subscription package, if there's no guarantee that you can kind of work out how valuable it is. Streamers are kind of notorious for not paying great money either. Like compared to sort of DVD and VHS, those kind of glory days where you could make loads of money. So again, that makes it difficult sometimes to get financing, particularly if you're looking for a bit more money. I'm hoping that we do see a bit of a rise in kind of indie films, and what I've noticed in the last maybe year or so, particularly with things like Terrified 2 and Pooh, even Cinderella's Revenge, is companies are putting films out, even if it's like a week sometimes or on a handful of screens, they're doing theatrical releases. I think that's sometimes it might be a bit of a loss leader just to get the film's name out there, get a bit of prestige that comes with being a theatrical release. But I don't know. I think maybe because streaming is making it quite difficult in some ways in terms of making big revenues, people are kind of looking back to other ways that maybe they can kind of boost the income for their films. So hopefully we'll see a few more kind of smaller indie films getting theatrical runs, targeting those areas where you know that horror fans might come out, as long as the film's been marketed well. I mean, Natasha Henstridge was on a load of sort of chat shows and morning shows, kind of promoting the Cinderella's Revenge. So she did a really good job of putting the word out. But yeah, I'm hopeful that we can kind of see a few more of those. A few of my films are kind of getting theatrical releases in other territories now. So The Baby in the Basket should be getting some in kind of like Asia and Latin America, where that kind of horror is really big at the moment. So yeah, you never know. Never say never with the US, but we'll see. We're hoping at least for a good release on streaming and some maybe hopefully physical media as well.
Since you're a writer and you love horror so much, if you decided to write a horror film and you put yourself in there as a character, what type of character would you be in your horror film, and would you end up surviving?
I'd probably be Jack Nicholson in The Shining, to be honest. I'd have to write a little bit of myself, but exaggerate it a lot. So I suppose it's that typical thing of a writer that just goes mad out, in the wilderness somewhere. I'd probably give myself a grisly death as well, just for the fun of it.
I can picture you being a young Jack Nicholson at like this scary Drury inn somewhere in Ireland or Scotland, and you're like this washed up writer, and you're trying to write this perfect horror novel, and then all of a sudden you start going batshit crazy. I can picture you doing that. Since you're a night owl and you stay up a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, one day maybe. Occasionally I kind of step in front of the camera. It's not my favourite thing to do, but yeah, we'll see. I'll film it in Scotland and get Nathan to shoot it for me.
That'd be wild. So, also, I didn't know this. You're also a writer for The Flickering Myth. I love that website. That's on one of my top websites I like to go to. I mean, it seems like you British writers really put your heart and soul into what you're writing, especially horror or whatever. And I just enjoy hearing points of views from people from, all around besides the States. And I just love your articles and Flickering Myth. They're just so entertaining.
Thank you. That's good to hear. I mean, I'm a bit biased, but I think, we are genuinely one of the best websites out there. I think just in terms of like the broad range that's covered, I mean, even for what I do, I cover such a massive range because I do anything from like old sort of 80s and 90s straight to video action films.
Yes.
To sort of, I go right, I even do world cinema. I go right back to the sort of 30s and 40s classic cinema.
Nice.
I cover sort of almost every genre, so we really do touch every base. And there's other writers there that kind of have similarly eclectic kind of range as well. But it always comes from a place of kind of passion, and there's not, I think a lot of websites now can kind of be a bit too, their first instinct is to kind of tear films down rather than praise films. And we come from a little bit more from a positive angle, really. I mean, you still get reviews on there, negative reviews, but it's always constructive and fair, I think. And I mean, from myself personally, because I'm now in the film industry kind of working and writing, and I know what goes into producing them, I feel like I'm more constructive now if I review a film than I used to be. I tend not to review too many, and I prefer to review films that I kind of know I'll like, so I can kind of have a positive angle on it. But I think Yeah, it's a good site to write for. I like the fact that I can kind of almost write about anything or whatever the kind of the mood strikes, and people tend to read it. So there's an audience out there. I've had a few kind of articles that have been gone viral,
Really? What were
which is
they?
all nice. Yeah, there was one I did on. So anything I do on like Canon or anyone that does on Canon films,
I
the
love
site
Canon
tends to do
films.
love it. Yeah. So anything like that tends to do really well. Old school stuff. I did one on Heat that just got loads of traction all over the place.
Nice.
Um, yeah, it's just occasionally we'll get retweets from the odd celebrity here and there. Um, Tarantino praised the site once, which was nice, and Ron Perlman as well.
That's
So
pretty. That's pretty cool.
yeah,
Now let's. Now you got my attention. Let's talk about the Canon films. I grew up watching those and renting those at the mom and pop video stores. I mean, man, they produced and made so many hundreds of films like in 1 year, man. They were everywhere, man. The Canon films that got me into liking Canon were all the American Ninja films because I love Michael
yeah,
Dudikoff. That what got me into the Canon films, and then after that, I started exploring the other Canon films. I mean, those films, some of them may have been a little ridiculous, but they're just so fun to watch. I can go back and I have a bunch of Canon films in my physical media library. I can go back and watch these. I mean, it's like, hey, I like this. It's cheesy now, but still fun to watch. I mean, I wish he would make some great flicks. Like Canon films, kind of give it like like a homage or something. I think they're great, and especially when Chuck Norris was part of that whole canon.
yeah. I mean, I think they did this kind of thing where they almost started a model that was really popular in the straight to video era, where you put a massive amount of your budget into getting like a big name star. So they put all their eggs behind kind of like Chuck Norris being a next big star. And then Charles Bronson, he was kind of like on the way down at that point, but then they made him a headliner. Um, but, a lot of their films, even though people sort of look at them and sort of turn their nose up sometimes because they're cheap, like compared to a lot of the films that came maybe a decade after in that range, there was quite a lot of money spent on certain films. Like Masters of the Universe was
Yeah.
the one that kind of got me into canon. That was my favourite film as a kid, but I know it's like a slightly lower budget Star Wars ripoff, but they actually got effects people from Star Wars to do the film. They got Bill Conti to do the score, so they're getting really good people in the crews, paying them quite a lot of money probably. Same with Life Force, they got quite a few visual effects whizzes that were well known for bigger films. Probably didn't give them quite as much money or time to work with, but you still get, among some ropey moments, you still get some impressive moments in a lot of those films. A lot of really great looking films as well. And they had the odd kind of gem there, the odd bit of critical acclaim, I guess, with things like Runaway Train.
Yes. Another favorite one of mine too is because Canon did a little bit of horror. I love the Rockers zombie Canon film where the rockers turned into zombies and they were like playing their instruments, and I thought that was just so much fun to watch.
I've not seen that one, but that's one I keep seeing clips for. I keep meaning to watch.
Oh, it is fun. You'll be watching it. You'll be like, "Oh my gosh, what am I watching?" But it's just so good. You're just sitting there going like these rockers from the '80s are like these like hair metal band. Going to this little small hit town, and all of a sudden they become zombies, and then you see them like going to playing concerts as zombies. Taking care of business. It's such a fun film.
Yeah, that definitely sounds. I mean, they did some of the sort of craziest films, I guess, of that era.
Yeah.
Some of the wildest concepts. So yeah, there's definitely a big charm to them, and again, that's probably why the articles are always so popular.
Yeah, that's pretty. I like I said, I'm like you. And another thing I totally respect you about too. You're a cinephile, just like me. I mean, horror and action are my two top favorite babies, but I love other films, even from the silent film era through the 40s like you, and I respect other cinephiles like me, who really takes that passion to, write these, great movies from these different eras, to let people know it's like, this seems pretty interesting. I'm not used to watching the old black and white or something. Maybe I should go check it out. It seems like nowadays a lot of people don't appreciate black and white films. That's just my opinion.
No, I think it's even something like when I was growing up, where someone might ask if you wanted to watch a black and white film. Some people would just naturally be hesitant, even back then. But it's never bothered me too much. It's one of those things that occasionally it comes back into fashion every now and again. If someone well known puts out a film that does well and it's shot in black and white, I think like The Lighthouse, for example, looked really amazing.
Great film.
Yeah, I love that film. But yeah, I'm really, usually I like looking back at, especially like old film noirs. I love that kind of lighting as well. Even like a couple of weeks ago, I watched Casablanca again, and that's just still such an amazing film.
Oh, it's a beautiful film. One of my favorites, I like watching over and over again. I know it's been rebooted so many times, is The Maltese Falcon, and I can go back and watch the Humphrey Bogart. I just love the lighting and the crazy characters in the film. I just love that whole premise of it, where Humphrey Bogart, is this, smooth, private eye, and it every time I watch it, it still keeps him on the edge of my seat, man. I just love the Maltese Falcon.
Yeah, I mean, there's just something about, I find it difficult these days because we've almost kind of filtered out the movie star now, where it's like, in terms of like the big studio stuff, people are more into the characters or the franchise or the IP over kind of like where you used to get big movie stars. You got like a couple that are still left, like Tom Cruise, Harrison Ford. Most of like the big kind of like charismatic movie stars seem to be kind of at the end of their career rather than anyone kind of rising up. And I watched The Maltese Falcon again recently as well. It's another like favorite of mine. And even then, I was just saying to a few people, I just say they just don't make them like Bogey anymore.
Oh, Bogey was smooth. Anything that Bogey did was golden, and anything he did with Lauren Bacall, I thought she was the most beautiful, classy woman back in that film noir era. She just had that sex appeal about her without, being sexy, you know what I mean? She just had that appeal about her. She was such a beautiful woman. Yeah,
I mean, I think maybe what you're finding now, because a lot of these films are struggling at the box office at the moment, big budget things, maybe it's because, the movie stars aren't quite as, it might not necessarily just be because they're not as charismatic as before. It might be that the whole system isn't built to kind of build them up the way they were. They're not really given that platform in the same way, where they're almost second fiddle to, Chris Evans isn't as important as Captain America, for example. But, maybe, building up your movie stars and making them kind of the center of attention again might be a way to get people back to the box office. Could be one way, as well as a few other ideas, maybe.
So do you think the box office is slowly dying? I mean, there's certain films you got to go to the box office and see instead of the small screen. Do you think the box office is going to still be around forever? Or do you think it's going to be like slowly drizzling away, like how they're trying to get rid of physical media? I'm a strong supporter of physical media, but do you think the cinema is going to be following that point, or do you think the cinema is still going to hold on strong a little bit?
I mean, I think it'll keep holding on. It's quite difficult at the moment because it's just, things are unpredictable. I think no one could have predicted how well a 3-hour biopic of Oppenheimer would do. Mm-hmm. That was kind of like out of the blue. I mean, maybe because of the whole Barbenheimer thing, they kind of tied together, and that kind of built this thing up. But again, that's unpredictable. Even Barbie, I mean, that was always going to be, I guess, a certain amount of popularity, but I don't think anyone would have predicted how much it would have made. And then you see things like The Fall Guy, where, you know, Ryan Gosling, one of the stars of the time, gets great reviews. Everyone seems to love it. Who actually goes and sees it, but then it flops. And then Furiosa now has kind of flopped as well, off the back of great reviews and one of the kind of stars at the moment. And it's just that thing of, you know, are the stars popular enough to kind of pull people in? Are they kind of... maybe they've kind of misread what people want to see. I mean, yeah, The Fall Guy was probably a bit of a tougher sell because it's such a... Fans of the original probably won't go and see it because it's kind of so old. Maybe they don't kind of like the way they're approaching it. And as a concept in of itself, it's probably not that appealing to the masses. But I think Furiosa, that was probably quite a surprise. I know Fury Road did good numbers, but not great. But people would have expected a lot more.
I thought Furiosa was a beautiful shot film. I just love the cinematography in it, the beautiful like landscapes and sets and everything. I thought it was a great film. I really enjoyed it, and I know it, you know, bombed during Memorial Day weekend here in the States. It bombed hard, and I just thought it was a great film. It was beautifully shot. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed Fury Road too, and of course I grew up watching the original Mad Maxes, of course, but I thought it was beautifully shot. Like another good example, I went to the theater to see Godzilla -1, and the cool thing about that film is it went more about the humanity side instead of Godzilla. I mean, you still had Godzilla, you know, rampage, destroying stuff, but I love how they did the beautiful shots, more of the humanity side, which was just a perfect film too. So yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of that one, I mean, that's probably the model that they could kind of base things around. Really, it was really small budget compared to all the sort of Hollywood stuff. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's the way to do it and get. I almost feel like you have to get back to that point. Maybe in the late 60s where all of a sudden all these kind of big epics were kind of bombing slightly.
Yes.
And so you had that kind of movement where, you know, Coppola came in and all these other directors and, you know, Sidney Lumet was kind of hitting his peak again. And they were doing these kind of like, I guess, comparatively smaller films. Quite gritty. It was a very indie approach, even though a lot of these were still studio movies. And you just had this kind of run of 10 years before Star Wars came along of these really intense, gritty kind of films, smaller budgets, more intimate stories. And I'm wondering if that's the kind of the way to do it.
I think so.
Yeah, it's difficult. You know, A24 is doing really well at the moment, but they could still be getting, you know, wider releases, I think, because I think I often see, particularly in the UK, it's quite bad at the moment, where you'll see a cinema putting an ad out on Facebook or something and say, "Oh, come to see Civil War," and then every comment below is, "Well, it's not showing at my local View Cinema or my local Cineworld or whatever," and you know, people can't get out to see it. So the audience is there to see kind of like these indie films,
but it doesn't like. I totally agree with you. Yeah. Like Cinderella's Revenge, I won't get a chance to see it at the theater, which is sad because I wouldn't mind seeing it on the big screen. Just like your movie, The Baby in the Basket, I want to see that so bad. The way how you were like, tell me about it, I'm so intrigued. I got to see that film, and I would love to see it in the big screen. But I have a feeling it's not going to be shown at the big screen here in the States. I think it's going to probably end up being in streaming. Like you said, it's going to probably go to the popular markets like Asia and India and all that. But, you know, and that's a shame because that's the way you can get more horror fans to go to the, you know, the theaters to see stuff like that. And like you said, there's some people who go, "Hey, I saw it at the cinema." And the other person's like, "How'd you get to see it? They don't show those type of films at my cinema. How do you get lucky to see that?" You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it would be nice. I think I'm always thinking that, you know, people now kind of go watch a sort of a Neon film or an A24 film.
Yeah, those are good.
And yeah, and they these are films that tend to be a bit more kind of thought-provoking, or, you know, you've got to be a bit more attentive. People kind of dismiss the younger audience as being kind of having a short attention span, you know, always wanting to just watch TikTok instead. But there is a kind of small, kind of devout audience that want to watch kind of good indie films. And you have to be targeting your kind of niche audiences, I think, and making kind of indie films, giving them a bit of a platform. It's not as much of a risk if you've spent, you know, 5 million on a film compared to 250 million. So I'm hoping that people make more of those films. We see a few more kind of indie studios rising up to do that kind of thing. And then, maybe that's a way to get people back into the cinemas. But, you know, the multiplexes have to gamble a little bit more on showing a bit more of a range, because, you know, like they say on people moaning on Facebook, you know, they can go and watch Garfield and a load of these other films in an empty theatre room, or, you know, when they want to watch Civil War, but they can't see it because it's not shown locally, and, you know, whatever other film it might be. But, you know, a few years ago you had Uncut Gems doing really well, a few other films for A24 doing well, and they still probably could have been given a little bit more of a wider release, I think, and people would have gone to see them. I think, you know, Mandy by Nick Cage is another film that I really liked.
That's a beautiful, well-made, shot film. I love the color schemes in that film. The soundtrack, it was just so perfect, you know. And like, speaking of A24, I loved, you know, Pearl and X, but I'm so stoked for Maxine, man. You know that movie's gonna nail it at the box office.
I'm hoping so. Yeah, that's definitely my kind of film. I'm hoping that when it comes to the UK that they'll give it a decent release, because the previous two didn't really get much of a release over here. And I'm hoping that it gets a good release over in the States as well. But that's definitely my kind of film. Is paying homage to an era of horror I really liked, and a style as well, the giallo style.
Yeah, and one more question. Also, another film, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It was like an older film. Have you ever seen Fade to Black?
No, I haven't. That sounds
okay. It's about this. It's about this. It was made in the 80s. Okay, it's about this young guy who works for this movie studio, and he's obsessed with film, and he's like real crazy. So he dresses as his favorite like horror villains in these films, and he goes around as a serial killer, dressing these characters, killing people, and then he falls in love with this woman that looks dead on like Marilyn Monroe. And that movie is a straight slasher type of film. You definitely need to see it. It's called Fade to Black. It was good.
That is definitely something I'm going to check out.
Hey, I got something for you.
These kind of obscure, sort of underrated horror films.
Yeah, you'll like it. It was good. He was like obsessed with film. I mean, and people that did him wrong, he would dress like certain characters. He'd be like dressed like a vampire, going around act like he was a legit vampire, or he was like this outlaw gunslinger shooting people with a 6-shooter and all. Oh, I'm not going to ruin it for you, but that movie was crazy, man. It's called Fade to Black.
Yeah. But again, you know, so many quirky ideas in the 80s, so many weird sort of films. That just sort of made me think of Vampire's Kiss a little bit as well.
Oh, Nicolas Cage, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, people are kind of responding to weird kind of films now, and sort of, I guess, almost extreme films. There was a lot made with Saltburn and some of the scenes in that, for example, and that got people talking at the water cooler. But again, it didn't get a big release to the cinema.
No, it sure didn't.
You know, the audience would have been there and, you know, could have made more money.
I totally agree with you. I mean, that would have been, totally cool, as well. And then another film I went and saw, I like anything that Nicolas Cage did. I just saw Arcadian. That was a great, apocalyptic type of film. And I love the creature in it, how it like kills its victims. It's just different and original. If you ever get a chance to check out Nicolas Cage's Arcadian, That's another great horror film. Anything Nicolas Cage does, I'll see. I mean, he can do anything. So
Yeah, I mean, I've loved most of what he's done since Mandy.
oh heck yeah.
He's really, yeah, his comeback, that's been really pleasing to me. So yeah, Nick Cage is great.
Oh, Nick Cage rocks. So, where can everybody find you on social media to check out your films so they can know what you're going to be doing next?
So I've got a page at Jolliffe Productions on Instagram. That's probably the best place. So I'm always updating there. So as and when we get news on release dates and The Baby in the Basket and Cinderella's Revenge, I'll probably be posting that on there.
That's pretty good. Thank you so much for coming on. I had a blast talking about horror, your upcoming films, and our love for cinema. I just loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robin. I had a great time. Thank you.
All right. Everybody have a great night, and thanks for listening to Horror Pop After Midnight.